Hello and welcome to day 3 of the vlog series with Wayne and
Jillian.
Each day this is day 3, and we've been setting out to find a topic and a subject. And today we felt to talk about something global in relation to the deep transition that's going on in the world right now. And oftentimes I refer to it as collapse. And that's a bit of a scary word for a lot of people. But a collapse is always a death and a rebirth. So there's deep hope as well as deep pain and death. And I know when we address that subject, everybody immediately vibes in to a certain degree or vibes out. It's been for thousands of years that people have related to a collapse. Martin Luther in the 1500s thought the end of the world was near. The Apostle Paul thought the end of the world was near. And if you're of that mindset, you can certainly look around you everywhere today and feel like something major is going on. I realize that people in different times had that same sense. But what we see happening today is that the structure of our society as we know it feels like to me like it's being hollowed out. Like if you could imagine a house of cards and you can strategically pull one after another and making it more and more precarious. There's such a precarious feeling about our structures.
The house of cards is how you've described it.
Yeah. And that crazy level of precariousness, and each day I tend to read the newspaper just to see if the world didn't fall apart the night before. And again, that might sound a bit extreme. And thank God it didn't fall apart overnight. But there's this heightened sense of how more precarious could it get before there is significant collapse that ripples through our world. Now we see it in other countries where they're living in deep collapse. And I contrast this precariousness, the heightened level of precariousness, with a really heightened level of denial, where a vast amount of the population goes about living their life hoping and ignoring, and if I just do what I've always done, that's all I can do. And so they're not responding or feeling into the changes that are going on under their feet.
And what is it that's not responding? And we would offer that it's the false version of them, of all of us. We all have this false version of ourselves is what we're offering. And it's actually this version that is bought in, has created this house of cards reality. So of course the false self is unhappy in this configuration, but it's not going to pull the peg, the peg out that has the whole thing fall. It's like it's more like what it feels like to me. You say hollowing out. I feel it as a slow sabotage. And a sabotage happens when it's not authentic, when the foundation isn't based in anything solid or real or love. If it isn't love-based, then the false self will always self-sabotage. And this is the cycle you're talking about in human history, where it always sabotages itself. And then what emerges out of that collapse, like you already said, is a rebirth. What we're saying is the collapse is inevitable, it feels like. It's a natural cycle. And then so what...
We see it in nature.
Right. What rebirths out of that collapse is the authentic self, but not without healing. So it's not just that, all the false systems collapse, the authentic self emerges, because that's not what's happened in history. So we're really offering then, how does the authentic self emerge out of that collapse?
Yeah, that's a really deep question, because the anxiety that all of us feel around if we're tuning it in, there's a deep anxiety about how foolish it is to expect next year, next month, next week, or possibly even tomorrow to look like it did yesterday.
Right.
And that resistance to change has some people in their anxiety thinking they need to fill their basement and stock
The
up
false self and its anxiety. I'm just trying to make this point today. Stocks their basement full of...
Feels they need to stock it full of survival supplies.
Right.
But that in itself creates a hold the fort mentality that really heightens the anxiety now, because now you not only you have to guard the fort, and so that we're living in this pretzel of our times that to me feels so heightened. And so there's this whole piece about the false self's relationship to it. There's also, because it's so pervasive, a false structure, a hollowed out false structure with this heightened denial being the leveraged amounts of fuel that you need to pour into it to keep it working.
Yes. Which is the definition of inauthentic denial.
Yeah.
But that's what keeps it together.
And the absence of transparency and all of that. It really creates this strange frequency where people aren't ready until they are. But this heightened thing of not being ready to really choose their own growth and healing. And this is where the authentic self can feel the picture of what's changing, feel the insecurity, feel their own relationship to change, and begin to make solid choices.
You have to, but you have to wake up out of your denial. And maybe that's why we feel it is an awakening that needs to happen in order to make the choices, to make those choices.
To begin to inhabit your power, because anytime you're in denial, there's great slabs of your power that's not being inhabited, but it certainly is yours to inhabit. Most Canadians, I understand, are about 75 or 1.75 of their annual income there's their debt load, and they don't have any hope of paying that off. So it's just, I'll just pay the interest if I can, and we'll just defer that. Well, to some, the message is you need to get real busy and real dedicated back to the system and make those payments and get out of debt. When really the laws in our country offer bankruptcy if there's not a reasonable hope of repaying. That was something I did 2 years ago, and it was certainly with a couple of years processing, well, what about my self-image, where there was emotional...
With parts of yourself.
With parts of myself to feel. My relationship to bankruptcy, but that was just one piece of choice to really let in a whole new frequency and dimension of my life by exercising my power.
You had to negotiate that choice, though, and in a way, the awakening. I guess I'm coming back to what we say Soulful Heart is about, which is awakening your emotional consciousness. And what do we mean by that? So there's a growing number of people that have a consciousness about the collapse and about the transition, and they're aware of it, and we've even gone to some transition meetings, and there's this sense of knowledge. I'll learn about permaculture, I'll learn about alternative currencies. Learning about these things is one level, but then actually feeling your consciousness, your emotional consciousness, wake up to what's going on outside and inside is what we're talking about. And that's the process we offer, is actually not only are you wake up to what's going on outside of you, that's an aspect of the environmental aspect that we offer, but what you really become hyper-conscious of is what's going on inside. And so that's what you had to navigate. You were aware, wow, the global financial systems are collapsing. I'm going to pull out of this, and I don't want this debt load. Literally debt load. It's funny they call it that, on me anymore. But then you had to be aware and negotiating your inner emotional
that's the big
reactions to that. And that's the piece that people don't do.
So the idea of, here's the externals, consider bankruptcy, consider
Right.
this, consider
Right.
survival goods, or consider. And really, at the end of the day, you just get really pretzelated and going, well, I could only do a tiny fraction of any one of those things. And so it's like, push it out of your mind and just try and hope that add some more denial back on top is the common choice. But what we're saying is I liken it to the Noah's Ark story in the great transition of that story. The Noah's Ark for us is to be navigating with our heart, and it's a sacred process. It's not some evil calamity that's coming upon the world as we know it.
Right.
It's a death and a rebirth, and it's as natural as the forest outside, and that we see. It's as natural as what happens in
a lightning storm.
A lightning
comes
storm,
in
and even the cycles in our bodies on a daily basis.
Right.
But it's just freaking scary because of the sheer scale of it and the scale of the falseness. But the safe place is in your heart.
That is the ark.
Is the ark.
Yeah.
And in your own heart and emotional awareness of being in your soul growth. These times are so alchemical that by embracing your sense of what your soul and heart feels it's here to be healing,
offering
to be
your gifts,
moving towards doing, offering your gifts, that is such a radical reorientation to life. And this is where we say Soulful Heart is a way of life, because that is what it is. Every one of us has a way of life. We're just offering a more conscious one, and that's evolving just by us living it. But that's so different to feel like the transition initiatives around the world today are there is some talk of inner transition. We take that up as being the guiding light of any external transition, is to get to know and feel the real reactions that are going on in your own heart, your own life.
And what comes to me is that without that inner transition happening, all you can do is react to the outer transition, rather than I love that your arc being here. That's proactive, without just taking actions. When I say proactive, I'm talking about emotionally proactive, so that your sense of home is here, your sense of trust is with the divine. So when things happen to you, you're responsive, not just reactive. To me, there's a very there's a distinction there.
Yeah.
And what does being emotionally responsive mean? To me, the key is emotionally responsive to yourself first and foremost. And this is where I feel like we have become so out of touch with what we're actually feeling. And then there's a huge amount we offer that's subconscious to us. So making it conscious, you become conscious of the conditions of the world. We're saying fine, but also become conscious of the conditions of this world in here.
Yeah.
And that is the priority.
I know when we speak of becoming conscious and becoming heart-centered or feeling-oriented, everybody gets a certain picture of what we might be thinking of. And from my own personal experience, I've been so radically struck through the journaling exercises that is a primary way that we use in getting to know parts of ourselves, to get to the feeling tones, for instance, of despair, and letting that part's reality emerge into our lives, where there's an adult us that we call the Soulful Heart Self, to hold that part of us, their reality, and let it emerge into our life. It is stark to feel those feelings that are paved over, buried, to have them invited. Many people would be just freaked out to have that level of contact. Christianity would think it's a demon spirit. It's definitely an entity with force, or with withdrawal, or with wounding, or reactions. But no, that's very much a part of you on buried inside of you, that you're doing life to whatever degree you're out of contact with that part. You are living in a strategized, strategic way as a false self that's working around this little landmine on the inside. And as those get felt, life takes a different trajectory with every turn. That's totally alchemical.
It might be interesting at some point if one of the people that we work with and is part of our community wants to drop into a part, and we can show you that, and you can feel that. And we'll be talking about, of course, this a lot more in the future. They were probably...
wanted to add that in deep transition, this was the piece I remember. What's the safest place to be in the transition? The safest place is, well, we could say it's that picture of that ark, but a lot of us have concerns, well, how am I going to find my way for food and shelter and money and exchange?
Right.
The safest place, I feel, is to be in giving your truest and deepest value to the world, because that has the deepest and truest value to the needs of others. So if you're hiding out in a job because it's secure, and but it's dead and boring, lifeless, killing your relationships, that's not a safe place at all. Now you say, well, what's my options? I got no choice. No, part of you is dimming the choices here. You might not be able to leave that job tomorrow, but you could let in the desire to begin feeling into leaving that job. And even though there's this great gulf between where you are today and where you suspect your real passion and calling is over here, taking responsibility for that is beginning to be willing to feel it and beginning to take a step. And short of that, you are screwed. There's no good news. The collapse will be far more painful and far less lovingly held in a transmutable way, that though there's difficulty, there's a manageability to the breakdowns that occur in your life. And I really feel the divine is moving that through us and offering us stages of embracing the change.
Well said. I feel that in my heart. That's certainly what we're doing right now, is giving our gifts for free, online, and trusting that will bring an exchange. For just showing up for this is giving us gifts. So.
Yeah. Wow. We're done?
I think so.
Wow, we're trying to keep these not too long each day.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to be doing this daily. That's what we've done so far.
Yeah.
And
we'll see if it arises.
We're feeling what topic to explore, and then just weaving the Soulful Heart Way of Life into that each day.
Yes.
Time for some pancakes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay, we'll see you back soon.
Bye.